is not only a continental phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. And you have to understand that if you go back just 10 years or so ago, areas like British Columbia and Alberta were starting to experience significant projected shortfalls in available conventional natural gas. But we have learned over the last little while to develop unconventional resources, and in particular shale gas resources. The shale zones are where we can expect much of our natural gas in the years to come from. The area sort of to the east of the Rocky Trench that I'm going to be talking about is an area larger than in size than all but 14 of the individual states in the United States. So if you take the Peace River region and the northern Rocky regions in northeast British Columbia and combine them, they're larger than the state of Nebraska, and they're just slightly smaller than the state of Kansas. It's a huge, huge area. It takes a lot of time to get around just on the main highway network, let alone the small roads that lead into the gas place. So with that said, I don't want to go into great detail about fracking, but it's important to understand two things. One, we hear a lot of talk by the industry and government that this is a technology that has been around for a long time. In fact, it hasn't been around for a long time as far as shale zones are concerned. It's only been in the last 10 years that we have seen a few things coming together that have allowed for the gas trapped in shale zones to be extracted. The three really important ones are lengthy horizontal well bores. So imagine drilling down a long way and then hitting the targeted zone and then drilling out a long way. To give you an idea of what's happening in British Columbia today, which is at the forefront of fracking technology, some of these horizontal well bores now go out over 2 kilometers. Okay? The other thing that has happened, which is very significant, is the placing of numerous wells on a single pad. This is a big industry innovation. And then the third one is forcing massive amounts of water deep underground into these zones to fracture or frack the rock, creating networks of cracks in the rock that allow the gas to be released. Very important to note that it's not just water that's pumped underground. You have to pump very large amounts of fine-grained sand underground as well to keep these fissures open so that the gas can be released. And I'll talk about how we in British Columbia have taken American know-how and run with it like nobody could imagine. We are at the forefront of fracking. We're setting world records for fracking in terms of the amount of water we're using, the amount of sand we're pumping underground, and of course the chemicals, which account for about 0.5%. It may range as high as 2% of all the material that is pumped underground to facilitate the gas coming up. Energy companies are the only companies in British Columbia that get their water from anybody else other than the Provincial Ministry of Environment. The one significant caveat to that is that the energy industry at this point in time cannot get access to long-term water licenses. That power still rests with the Environment Ministry, although there's a bit of a wrinkle there that I'll explain in a minute. This gives you a better understanding of what's going on. It's a shot taken from the air, obviously, and it gives you a sense of the scale of one of these pads. So here you have the water that's going to be used. Here you have some of the wastewater that's produced in the fracking operations. Here you have a collection of trucks, all fitted with massive diesel compressors on the backs of them that are used to pump the water at somewhere between 5,000 and 15,000 pounds per square inch pressure into the earth to fracture the rock. If you look at the debate over natural gas usage in Canada and in the United States, I think it's worth noting that there's sort of two views that are commonly expressed. The one view is that we have maybe a century's supply of natural gas from these shale sources, that it is an abundantly available fossil fuel source, that it is a clean, quote, transitional fuel that will take us to the low carbon economy we allegedly all want to get to. The other view is that if you add up all of the energy that is required to produce this gas, it's probably on an equivalent with coal. There's huge amounts of energy, as I said, that are required to get this gas underground. Commonly, there are methane leaks that are associated with gas production. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. So when you weigh all of the energy inputs the associated gas that escapes into the atmosphere, it is a significant greenhouse gas source that we ought to be concerned about. I'm not going to go into great detail about the impacts. I'd be happy to field questions on it, but generally speaking, there are three areas of concern. One is the frequently undisclosed use of chemicals in the fracking process. The other is the potential for groundwater contamination. And the third and very significant issue, which is becoming a major bone of contention in the Marcellus area that I talked about earlier on, is what we do with the contaminated wastewater. There's only two ways typically to deal with it. One, you pump it deep, deep down into the earth at disposal wells, which is the preferred disposal option right now in northern British Columbia, or you treat it. The third option, and it is an important one, and we are seeing industry being quite innovative in this regard in British Columbia, is to reuse some of the water, to capture it and reuse it. And that is happening, but it needs to happen a lot more. Shale gas regulation and water allocation in British Columbia, some main points that I want to highlight. There is an absolute surge in water approvals by the energy regulator, the Oil and Gas Commission, and these approvals are happening largely out of sight, out of mind. Generally speaking, the regulator and industry alike both downplay the amount of water that's being used and downplay any significant environmental impacts. There is at present no licensing of groundwater withdrawals in British Columbia. And I will say on that point that I, for one, would like to see at least some aspects of the proposed water modernization process continue, because we desperately need groundwater legislation in this province. We don't have it right now, we need it. And if the Water Act modernization process delivers that to us, that's something we should all be encouraged about. There's clearly a lack of data that we need to be concerned about. And included in that lack of data is no present requirements that companies disclose the chemicals that they are using in their fracking operations. Now, in the United States, and I actually meant to correct this slide, it's not a question mark, there is a coming tide of regulation as it applies to the shale gas industry in the United States. To give a couple of quick examples, the state of Wyoming has made it a requirement that companies disclose the chemicals they use in their fracking operations. The state of Colorado has made it a requirement, but not a public requirement. Companies must disclose, however, to the important agencies what chemicals they are using. The state of Pennsylvania, I can tell you, is going to be enacting regulations on wastewater disposal, because what has been happening in that state is that wastewater has been trucked by the millions of gallons and deposited at municipal wastewater treatment facilities. The water has been so toxic that it has damaged the equipment in these facilities, which then discharge it into local rivers and streams, and there have been fish kills in these rivers and streams. So there are concerns, rightly so, about where this water is going to, wastewater is going to be moved to and disposed. The Environmental Protection Agency is involved in what will probably be a 1 or 2 year probe. The US Congress is looking into this issue. There is rising pressure from investor groups to see this industry more properly regulated. And very significantly, individual energy companies are conceding that they need to do a better job and that they need to disclose. That's not happening here, but it is happening in the States, and it likely will drive some of the things that happen here. So I want to end by just posing the question, what do we do looking ahead? When I worked on the report for the Munk School, shortly after the report came out, someone from Greenpeace called me and said, how are we going to stop this? And I kind of paused and said, well, I don't think we are going to stop it, at least not here in British Columbia. There may be opportunities to stop it in certain jurisdictions. It's going to fall to the people in those jurisdictions to make it a political issue. And we have seen subsequently in the province of Quebec significant pushback from the public and a moratorium placed on developments there probably for the next couple of years. But here in British Columbia, this industry is well established. Fracking is expanding at an incredible rate, and I don't believe that we're going to see it stopped anytime soon. Having said that, I think it's vital that we work as hard as we can to encourage our government to ensure that this industry is properly regulated and that we don't push forward with development because that's just where our next pot of money is going to come from. The gas that is in the ground isn't going anywhere. We should be developing it in a rational way where we develop it. And we should be insisting that when it is developed, it's developed in a proper way that's going to safeguard the environment and public health and safety. That's the central heating facility for downtown Vancouver, and it's gas-fired, and it's heating this room. That gas is coming from somewhere. It's coming from northeast British Columbia. So we're linked in with this whether we like it or not. And we need to think about that moving forward, because whatever we may think about the spin that government puts on these things, significant amounts of money are coming in. They're going to pay for things that you and I rely on. So we have to think through this stuff. What are we going to do? And how are we going to support people like Bob, who live daily with the impacts of this industry?